The views expressed in this show are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy, or the U.S. government.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Philosophication with Ginger and the Beard. I'm Jason, and this is part 2 of our discussion on the Iliad. There will be a link in the description to part 1, or you can just go find it on our channel if you missed it and want to catch up before you listen to this one. For everyone else, we hope you enjoy part 2.
I guess before we start on the fate and destiny part, which I'm excited to talk about, I kind of glossed over something in part 1 that I want to talk about, like, just briefly, which is that I said Diomedes was my favorite character in the story, and I just kind of said that, but I didn't say why. I love Diomedes because he's like the stand-in for Achilles while Achilles isn't fighting. And he's the one that replied to the messenger that the Trojans sent, saying, you know, we don't want Menelaus' stuff back. Like, he shouldn't take it back. And even if Helen was part of the deal, we should still stay here and sack the city. And I love Diomedes because he's the epitome of what we were talking about before. Like, he seems to me he's about, like, war for the sake of war, which is kind of horrible, but also kind of badass, you know? Like, he knows what he is. He's a warrior, and he's good at it, and that's what he does. And he doesn't make any kind of pretensions to be anything else, and there's no complications with him like there is with Achilles. Like, there's no butting heads with Agamemnon or anything like that. He's just there to fight, and that's what he does, and he's good at it. And he's always, like, the first one to volunteer for everything. Like, there's one point where the Achaeans need a little morale boost, and it's like the night where they retire to their camps for the night, and the leaders decide that they want to send a raid into the Trojan camp, and they ask for volunteers, and Diomedes is like the first one to volunteer. And he's like, I'll go. And he takes Odysseus with him, and they go and fuck some shit up, and it's pretty cool. It's like a nighttime raid against the Trojan camp. It's a pretty cool chapter. And then there's a whole other part of the story where he gets, like, imbued with superhuman strength and abilities by Athena during a battle, and just goes and destroys everyone. It's almost like he got the star in Mario, and it's like no one can touch him for a little while, and he just destroys everyone. And I think he actually ends up fighting Apollo and wounding him, and, like, winning. Like, he fights a god and wins. It's pretty awesome. But that's why I love Diomedes.
Yeah, that's the part where it, like, really pisses off the other gods. They're like, oh, okay, now a god has been hurt. This has gone too far.
Yeah. They're like, okay, he can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, Athena, you can't let your guy do that.
Yeah.
He can kill all the humans as much as he wants, but he can't touch the gods. That's not cool.
Yeah. So
but anyway,
you like him the most.
Yes, that's why I love Diomedes.
Okay.
So, I want to talk about fate and destiny in this story, which I'm excited to talk to you about because we've talked about something like this a few times in the past, like, you know, whether or not we have free will or whether everything is determined.
All right. Jesus.
Like that one, like when I came to your wedding, and when I got there that night and we were in the hotel room, we just spent like 3 hours the first night we got there.
Not in the hotel room, everybody. Out in the courtyard with a bunch of people. Was marrying a woman.
Right. We weren't the ones getting married. Michael was, not me.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Romance. Go on.
Anyway, so yeah, the thing in the story is the approach to storytelling is different, and I think it has a lot to do with the ideas of fate and destiny. And what's different about the storytelling is we, as modern audiences, when we consume media like books or movies or whatever, generally speaking, we don't like to know how it ends before we see it or read it. We want to not have spoilers, and we try not to spoil things for other people, and we get pissed when other people spoil things for us. Like when I accidentally spoiled Joffrey's death for you that one time, and you got pissed.
You're spoiling it right now for people who haven't gotten to that point.
Yep, spoiler alert for Game of Thrones, everybody.
Dang it. All right.
I did that on purpose, actually.
Worst.
Because, if you haven't seen Game of Thrones by now, then you're probably not going to.
Well,
but anyway.
I sure hope you change your mind if that does describe you. It's worth it. It's amazing. I did hold out for like 3 seasons before I finally started watching.
Yeah. So anyway, the point is, modern audiences don't like to have things spoiled, generally speaking. But it would have been different for the ancient Greeks. And what you have to understand about epic poetry like this is that it was oral tradition for a long time before it ever got written down for the first time, maybe for hundreds of years before it ever got written down. And how it would be repeated through the oral tradition was they'd have traveling poets that would travel around the Greek world and perform this poem for people, for crowds of people, almost like a minstrel or something from like the medieval Europe or whatever. So they would have these poets that would travel around and they would tell these stories in poetry, and they would have assumed that their audience was familiar with all the mythology surrounding the story, so that like they would tell the story of the Iliad, and they would assume that everyone in the audience was familiar with the surrounding mythology. Like they knew what happened in the Trojan War, they knew how it ends, they knew Troy ends up falling, they knew Achilles dies after the Iliad ends, and so there's nothing to spoil. Like the audience already knows what is going to happen in the end. So the drama doesn't come from not knowing what the outcome is going to be. The drama comes from seeing how the characters react to their situation within the story. Even though in a lot of cases, the characters themselves know what the outcome is going to be. They know what their destiny is. And you can see that in the story. Like there's so much foreshadowing that goes on. Like Homer is constantly telling you what's going to happen at the end, and a lot of the time there's not even any shadowing to the foreshadowing. It's just like he's just straight up telling you what's going to happen. So it's just a different approach to storytelling, and I think that ties in with how they would have looked at fate and destiny. So it's interesting to me to see how characters act when they know what their destiny is already. Like, for example, Hector pretty much knows he's going to die and Troy is going to fall. And yet he still fights. Like he still goes out and does his duty as a man and as a warrior to the rest of his countrymen and his family. And going into his duel with Achilles, he knows he's going to lose, and he knows Achilles is going to kill him. But I guess, I don't know. It's a little hard to wrap my head around that. Like, because for us, even if you go with the deterministic worldview that says we don't actually have free will, we don't necessarily know what our fate is. Even if it's already determined, we don't know it. So it seems to us as if we have free will. But these characters in the story, like, oftentimes they do know how things are going to turn out for them. And yet they still act in a certain way.
Yeah, that is cool how they tell stories, and that's how it is in the stories. Yeah. Seems a little backwards though. You're saying, it's indicative of the time that's how they tell stories, and it doesn't bug people because they all believe in destiny.
Yeah, I guess. So it seems to me like kind of the driver behind it, or at least some of it, is it ties back into honor culture, which we were talking about before. And it's almost like, so it's like sometimes the characters know what the final outcome is going to be for them, but they don't necessarily know what's in between. Like, it's still up to them how they act in the meantime, knowing what their destiny is. So, and it's like the ultimate accomplishment, the ultimate honorable accomplishment for them is to have people repeat their name long after their death. You know, it's like this idea that you never truly die until no one remembers you anymore. And if you can gain so much fame and so much honor in life that people never stop repeating your name, then you've gained immortality through name repetition. So it's like, that's the goal for these guys. They want to gain. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I forget where I heard this recently. It may have been like some Netflix movie, the Hill House or something. Is that what it is? Hill House?
Oh, Haunting of Hill House?
No, yeah, Haunting. I just thought it was called Hill House. Maybe it's Haunting of Hill House. The Netflix original?
Yeah, it's like a series.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really good. I like that.
Oh, yeah, really good. But maybe that's where I heard it. But I recently heard someone say that, you know, we all die twice. First, when your body dies, and second is the last time someone speaks your name.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, kind of the same idea, you know, that's the closest to immortality we can have. Or just, if not immortality, you know, life after death, prolonged life, prolonged existence after death in name alone.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And there's almost like for certain characters like Hector, notably, there's like a stoic attitude that comes with knowing what your destiny is. So there's this great quote from Hector at one point in the story. Like, he's talking to his wife, I think. Like, he takes a break from the fighting to go inside the city. And he's talking to his wife, and he says something like, I'm going to paraphrase this, but he says something like, "No one is going to dispatch me to Hades before my due time. And as for that time, no man can escape it, whether coward or brave." And it's like, it's a great line. And it's like this wonderfully stoic kind of line. Like, yeah. I have a destiny. It's not going to change no matter what I do. And so I could be a coward, I could be brave. My destiny is not going to change. So I might as well be brave.
Yeah.
And be a warrior, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think determinism and stoicism seem to just work so well together. You know, I mean, I think you could obviously you can be someone who believes in free will and still be a stoic, and you ought to be, even if you believe in free will. Though I do think that's more problematic than people like to admit. But I think most people, myself included, just choose not to think about free will very much and just live as if we have it. And it's not like God, where free will is something people actively decide they believe in or they don't believe in. It's just, I think most people don't even think about it, but assume they have free will. But it is such a deterministic sort of outlook, stoicism. It's accepting the things that you can't control. So, I mean, you don't have to disbelieve free will to be a stoic. And I guess you could, the area in between where you could still be all about the free will is the things you can control. You know, that's what you care about. And that's what a stoic does. You know, you can control how you react to the environment. You can control how you react to what happens to you, your own emotions, your own thoughts. Well, maybe not your own thoughts so much, but your own attitude. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that the belief in destiny, and Stoicism, even the modern form of it, they really go well together.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're doing that a little bit, even if you don't think you believe in destiny. If you're being stoic and you're just accepting the things you can't control, in a sense, you're being kind of like Hector, at least somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that line because it's like it goes along, like you said, it goes along with Stoicism really well. And it's like the thing I can't control is my destiny. The thing I can control is my attitude towards it and how I act knowing what my destiny is.
And how I face it. Yeah.
Yep. So that's where the drama in this story comes from, is seeing how the characters react to stuff like that.
Yeah. It seems like even with this sense of destiny, right? It almost feels like they believe where they're going to end up is determined, but they still feel they have choices in between.
Right.
Their choices won't change that. That's why, like, destiny, it's probably better to think of it less as determinism, even though it kind of is. But destiny, by definition, means the end point. It's where you end up. So you can believe in destiny and believe in free will somewhat. You have limited free will, and there's something you can't control, which is how things turn out. So he can choose to be a coward, or he can choose to be brave, and he feels like he has a choice, but he just feels like either way he can't escape the destiny. So the difference is, unlike any modern realistic person who is a determinist and doesn't believe in free will, he knows the end point, and we don't.
Right.
So even a modern person, not we as in me, I don't think I'm a determinist. I don't know the answer, but I'm not ready to call myself that. But not knowing where you're going to end up, or the next step, or the step after that, or the step after that, it's like the whole thing is unknown. Whereas those people that believe in destiny, it's just the end point it's everything until the end point that they don't know. It's just the end point that they can't control.
Yeah. So the one character that gets to choose their destiny in this story is Achilles, and that kind of sets him apart from everyone else in that way. Like there's a prophecy, or I think it's his mother that tells him this or something. Somehow he knows that he has a choice in his destiny, which is more of a choice than any other character gets, but it's still a very limited choice. And it's like his choice is he can stay at Troy and fight and die young and live a short and glorious life and be remembered forever. Or he can leave Troy, go back home to his father, and live out a long life to be an old man, but in obscurity, like nobody will remember him. And so that's the choice he has. And this is like another thing that indicates to me that the goal of everyone in the story really is to gain immortality through name repetition, because Achilles knows that choice, and he chooses to stay at Troy and die young and live a short and glorious life.
Yeah, this is why, even though the movie Troy is not really the Iliad, and it's a lot more than that, covers a lot more, covers the beginning of the war, the end of the war, and the meat and potatoes of it is the content from the Iliad. But they do really capture that essence of Achilles, but they do make him seem like the only one who thinks that way. You know what I mean? Like, not the only one that thinks that way, but among all the leaders, like Hector himself is like, in 1,000 years, the bones, or the dust from our bones, will be long gone. And he said, yes, but our names will remain. And Achilles said that to Hector, right? And or when he's with the Myrmidons and they're landing on the beach, and he says, what's there waiting for you beyond that beach? Immortality. Take it, it's yours.
Yep. The line gets me going every time.
Yeah, they really do Like they do capture the essence of that. They do a good job in that movie. I really do think it's a good movie. It's one of my favorites. I don't know. Part of me wants to say, I don't think Brad Pitt was the best Achilles. I think it should have been like Hulk Hogan or something, or Sylvester Stallone. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Definitely someone beefier, But
yeah,
I know he wasn't supposed to be the biggest Greek, but
I don't know. I think
Brad Pitt's tiny.
Brad Pitt has about the right body type. He's not supposed to be a giant bodybuilder. He's supposed to be like a wiry guy, like a sinewy guy,
Sure. But still,
I mean, not small, but just like
maybe somebody with a raspier voice, just a little bit more rugged, but still. And then I think my favorite character is Ajax, and I think they nailed that. Except he died in.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert: he dies in Troy, and that's
he doesn't die in the Iliad.
No, he doesn't. I think he lives. He goes on to the Odyssey, which we haven't read yet, right? I think.
Yeah, that's interesting though. Like, he has a duel with Hector.
Yeah,
just like in the Iliad, just like in the movie. But he, they fight until sundown, and neither of them wins, and then they exchange gifts and become friends.
Yeah,
and they don't kill each other.
Yeah, he gives him a girdle.
Yeah,
his cod piece or something. Yeah, exactly. So that's too bad. But yeah, he's like the biggest Greek. I have a place in my heart for the biggest guys in all the stories.
Yeah,
my favorites. Or just like the strong dudes, I mean, I guess it's kind of ironic that Gimli is the dwarf in Lord of the Rings, so he's small, but he's also like supposed to be. Dwarves are supposed to be really strong, So he's hairy and strong, and I always kind of thought he was my favorite.
Because you're
do a good job.
Because you're hairy and strong.
I'm not that strong, and I'm not that hairy, but I want to be.
You want to be hairy?
Yes. Yeah. When I get out of the Navy, I'll grow it out.
Nice.
Not like him, not like you. You're gross. I'll have a handsome beard. But we'll have to change the name of the show or something. If we're still doing it at that point.
Beard in the beard.
Yeah. Ginger beard in the beard. Or something. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, so Destiny. I don't know. I think it's kind of neat to think about because this is something that, again, I think most people don't think about it. But I think most people don't really believe in destiny, but kind of do. You know what I mean? And then most people believe in free will, but kind of don't. It's like that's without any sort of deeper thinking about it. I think that's where people end up.
What do you mean by that? Like,
I mean, they don't believe in
kind of don't.
I'm saying like destiny. People think, they don't think of it like that. They don't think it's determined like that. But they kind of do believe in destiny. So first of all, most people are Christians, and this is something funny. God, we can go way down a rabbit hole on this, but something Ben Shapiro brings up all the time, and it really bugs me because he has like a 2-3 sentence thing that he always just throws out in the air whenever he's talking about religion versus atheism or secularism. And it's something along the lines of, without God, we're all just balls of meat floating around without purpose.
Yeah.
Something, very, very, very weak straw man of the opposing side. Nobody would ever say that. But anyway, what he's essentially indicating or insinuating is that without God, there can be no free will. And I feel the exact opposite. I'm like, with God, there can be no free will. With the God that you describe, I mean, certainly with a God so all the old pagans believed in all these gods, and they also believed in destiny. That made sense because there were gods that knew the future. And what happened is Christians took the same thing. I guess Hebrew, I guess it happened to the Jews first and then the Christians. And I suppose maybe it applies to Islam. I'm not sure how they feel about destiny or whatever. But I assume they believe in God that knows everything, right? So just like Thor and Odin and freaking, I don't know, Zeus and all these guys, they knew stuff. They knew destiny, right? They knew the destiny of men. But the difference is they came along and they decided, or they wrote it down. I don't know if free will is written specifically in the Bible, but because people, they say it's from the Bible, and the passages I've heard don't use the words free will, but basically indicates that God gave us choice. You know what I mean? And it's like, but he still knows everything, So I feel the exact opposite. I remember having this thought when I was like 17, 16 years old, wait, how can he already know what's going to happen and I get to choose what happens?
Yeah.
Right. How?
Yeah. I was troubled by that same question.
Right.
As a kid, when I was a Christian, I had some way of rationalizing it.
Right. Head, and people do this thing like God is outside of time. So he's looking at it like a 2-dimensional screen or something. He can see all of it from beginning to end. And it's just because he's like a 5th-dimensional creature or something or higher. And that's how he can see it. And to that, the point is still, whether he can see it or not, it's still there. Then you end up in the same deterministic a-religious argument of, if that's how time works, you know what I mean? That if you were a 5th-dimensional creature, you could see the end. That means the end is determined. That means you don't have a choice, right?
Yeah.
You have only what feels like free will. So making God a 5th-dimensional creature or higher, so that's your answer, just brings you right back to the a-religious question, which is, it puts you back in how physics works and how time and space relate to each other, and how, if the ending is determined, you can't change it. And if you can't change it, then you can't choose it. You know what I mean? So now what's funny is, like I said, that's not uniquely religious, because secular people and atheists also don't have a good answer for free will. There is no good answer for it. So the only answer anyone's ever came up with is God said so. God said you had free will. That's how, you know what I mean? That's how you square that round, I don't know what the expression is.
Square the circle.
Square the circle, right?
Fit the square peg in a round hole.
Exactly. That's how you do that, is God said so, right? And that's uniquely Judeo-Christian, I think. I don't know about other big religions today, but certainly in all the religions of history, they believed in determination, destiny, right? And there were famous Christians that believe in predestination, right? What are they called?
Calvinists.
Calvinists, yeah. And what's funny is, I'm like, I'm not a Calvinist, obviously, but that makes the most sense, right? How can you say, if it's true that if God can see the very end, and he can see all the people who are going to be in heaven with him later, right? Then it's already been determined who's going to heaven and who's going to hell, right? So why even bother? You have nothing to do with that decision, right? So,
right.
So anyway, it's like, that actually makes the most sense, and everyone else is doing mental gymnastics to make it work. So I appreciate the honesty, at least, of the Calvinists, even though I think they're, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So anyway.
Well, that was quite a tangent.
Yeah, what a tangent. Jesus. God. Okay, so that was my example of people who don't believe in destiny, but they kind of do. You know what I mean? They don't know that they do, but they do.
Okay.
Those are the people who think they have free will because God said so, but they also believe God knows everything. And since most people believe in God, and most people believe in in Yahweh, and in a monotheistic religion, we're talking about the same guy, and he does know everything, right?
Yeah.
I guess, think about Norse mythology. I guess maybe Odin knew everything because he traded his eye for knowledge or wisdom. Maybe he was just all wise. I don't know if he was all knowing or both, but either way, he was the closest to all knowing, right? But not all the gods knew everything. So That's like a god doesn't have to know everything by the definition of a god in like the classic sense. But anyway,
Yeah.
and then I guess people who do believe in destiny but kind of don't would be, maybe someone who thinks they're like destined for some sort of, I guess someone like Hector, I guess, but you think you're destined for something great, and that the choices you make in the meantime actually do matter, though. You know what I mean? Something specific. And a more recent example, another hero of mine is General George Patton, right? And it's not just in the movie. Like, I've read about him. I haven't actually read his biography. I've been meaning to. I want to. But he really was like that. He believed, like, if you haven't seen the movie, it's in there. Like, he believes he's destined to win, to be a great general in a great war. Like, he thinks that's his destiny, like his whole life. And, and like when he has moments of hardship in the movie, he has like monologues with himself, or there'll be some poor, like sergeant around or something that hears him, that he's venting to, about how, why would God bring me here? If like this, like, how is this, this is against my destiny or something. How is this going to get me to my destiny? So he really believed that he was destined for greatness, and that's the 1940s, and he died after the war was over, but it was in Europe in a car crash, right? He also thought he was destined to die in battle, which he wasn't, clearly. But, point is, but he's kind of a weirdo. Even in his own time, people people thought that was weird about him. You know what I mean? But look at him, he's one of those names that will be remembered for a very long time. People will still speak his name. Maybe not as long as Achilles, but for a long time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the gods a little bit, because this kind of ties in with fate and destiny. Yeah. And like, I can't quite figure out what the gods' relationship to fate is in the Iliad, because sometimes it seems like the gods are bound by fate. Like, there are the fates are embodied things. Like, I can't remember how many of them there are, but they're like beings. They're like immortal beings that's in Greek mythology. It doesn't explain that explicitly in the Iliad, but that's a thing in Greek mythology, and they refer to them there. So sometimes in the story, it seems like the gods are bound by the fates, and they have to, like, they have a destiny also, like, and they can't act in the mortal world unless it's in accordance with what the fates want. But other times it seems like they're determining fate. They're determining what people's destinies are. So I can't quite figure out what their relationship is with fate. And it might just change. Like, it might just be inconsistent because it's ancient mythology.
Yeah.
One interesting thing was, there were twice in the story, Zeus has these golden scales that he uses, and I think he's using them to consult the fates in some way. Like, before the first battle, the story starts between the armies, Zeus uses his scales and like puts like the essence, some kind of essence. It's like not a soul, but it's some kind of essence of the Trojans on this side and essence of the Achaeans on the other side, and sees how they balance. And that's how he determines who to cause to win the battle. And then he does the same thing later for Hector and Achilles' duel. So it's like,
so Zeus himself isn't the one.
Yeah,
he is choosing, but it's like he's choosing based on something. It's not just his will,
Yeah, that's what it seems like. It seems like he's using the scales to find out what the fates want, what the fates have determined is going to happen, and then he makes that happen in the mortal world. So it's kind of interesting, and I don't know, it seems complicated. Like everything with the gods is complicated in Greek mythology, but
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't think there's so much claiming in a lot of those old polytheistic traditions. Not so much of a claim of like all power or all knowledge.
Oh no, not at all.
Gods are a lot more like people that are they're like superheroes, basically.
Yep.
Like they're just like indestructible, immortal people. Some of them are wise and some of them are foolish and some of them are smart and some of them aren't. Some of them know a lot, some of them don't know much, right? So yeah, that seems, I don't know how unique it is. I mean, there could have been other religions we never heard of where gods were a lot more like Yahweh, but Yahweh was kind of the end all be all, which I guess makes sense. If you're going to claim there's only one, he's got to be pretty badass.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the gods in Greek mythology are very human-like.
Yeah.
Minus the fact that they're immortal.
Yeah.
But that's also an interesting thing because the gods in the Iliad are almost comic relief at times. Yeah. Like I'm sure you noticed this. It actually made me giggle sometimes reading what's going on among the gods because there's like the same kind of honor culture power struggle going on among the gods as the humans are fighting. And some of the gods side with the Trojans and some side with the Achaeans, but you would think that they're gods, right? So they're going to decide who to side with for good reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time it's for super petty reasons.
Yeah.
Like they have personal grudges between each other, or one of them owes another one a favor, so they side with their side. It's like a cat fight amongst all of them. And it's like, that's why it's comic relief, because it's like, they're like a dysfunctional family. They're always just bickering amongst each other. And Zeus is sitting up here like the father, and he's just exasperated. And he's like, oh my God, will you guys, oh my me, will you guys just stop it?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what it's like. But you would think that, if you didn't know anything about the story, you might think that the gods are immortal. They control the world. So their struggles would be the most consequential struggles of the story. Like theirs would be the most important. But it's really not that way at all. Like theirs are just petty family squabbles, and they're comic relief. And the tragedy, the great consequential events are all going on among the mortals.
Yeah.
And I kind of think it's because they're immortal. Like their events are less important because they're immortal. Like when they fight each other, they can't hurt each other. Like they can hurt each other, but they can't permanently harm each other. They can't kill each other because they're all immortal. And so nothing they do to each other has any lasting consequences. Like anything that has lasting consequences is stuff they're doing to the mortals. And it's like all these mortals are suffering and dying by the thousands because of the gods' squabbles amongst themselves. Yeah. Like the whole war, the reason, I don't remember exactly how it was tied in, and I know this from other material, but the reason the war started was that Paris stole Menelaus' wife. And the reason he did that was somehow tied in with this contest between three goddesses over who was the most beautiful. And like without that, the war wouldn't have started. So
yeah. Yeah, I think it might just come down to as humanity has gone along, people have just gotten better at answering questions about like why all this is happening. So it's clearly based on all that. I'm not saying it's any more true, but the God of Abraham is just a better answer. You know what I mean? Like the Christian idea of God is just a better answer to those questions of why is all this happening, because you say it's so complicated. You're like, do they actually control everything or don't they? It's like they didn't actually have those answers. Like, so the story they made up about the gods answered some questions, made people feel like there was purpose,
Right.
but it left a lot of questions unanswered. And now, but then the monotheistic religions have come along, and now they have the answer for everything, right? So it does go to show that it's a game we've been playing since the very beginning. Since man looked up at the stars and wondered, why am I here? Or, am I alone? Things like that. And we've been trying to answer that question for a long time, and just goes to show we've gotten more and more nuanced and better answer, more and more comforting answer, where there's not so much confusion, not so many unanswered questions.
Yeah, you can easily see in the story how, if the events were historical and, if there's some historical root to them, how a person telling the story might have observed something going on. Like, I don't know why this guy acted in this certain way, or I don't know why this guy was like, how was this guy able to be so badass in battle? Like, must have been influenced by a god. Like, a god granted them superhuman strength and they destroyed everyone, or a god
Apollo must have been handing him spears and didn't hand the other guy spears, right?
Yeah. Or a god told this person to act in a certain way, and that's why he did what he did.
Yeah.
So you can easily see how how people would have made up those stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's about all I got on the gods.
Yeah, same. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, short and sweet.
Yeah, we done?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I don't really have anything else to talk about.
Thanks for listening to our discussion on the Iliad, and we hope you'll join us again for the next book on our list, the Odyssey. In case anyone's interested in reading it along with us, I'll put a link in the description to the version we're reading on Amazon. One last thing I want to add is that I'm starting a blog to go along with this Great Books project. I don't have it set up yet, but my goal is to have it up within the next week or so of the release of this episode, so depending on when you're hearing this, it might already be up. I'll make an announcement on one of these episodes and also start putting the link to it in descriptions and such. The purpose of this blog is, again, not to do exhaustive analysis of the books we're reading. I've already written down a lot of my own thoughts about the Iliad and kind of compiled the notes I took into one essay. And I mean essay in the loosest possible sense, because it is not in any way formal, really just a collection of my thoughts. So the purpose of the blog is just for me to have a place to share those thoughts and see if anyone else finds them interesting. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. If you like this show, there are many ways you can support it. You can talk about it on your own blog or podcast, you can share it on social media with your friends, or you can leave a rating or review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you happen to listen to it. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe to the channel and hit the thumbs up button if you like this video. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you next time on Philosophication.